So, The Woman in the Window is a new movie directed by Joe Wright, and it stars a whole bunch of people, including Amy Adams, Gary Oldman, Julianne Moore, Brian Tyree Henry, Anthony Mackie, Jennifer Jason Leigh. And it's about this woman played by Amy Adams. She's a child psychologist. She has a lot of issues. She's agoraphobic. She has a lot of issues with her family. She's not really in contact with them anymore. She's an alcoholic, of course. And one day she starts bonding with Julianne Moore's character. They seem to get along really well. And then soon afterwards, Julianne Moore is killed. And then Amy Adams is surprised that nobody takes her seriously. She feels like there's a cover-up involving Gary Oldman. And that's this movie. So I've heard about this movie for a while now. I knew it was based off a book. And that's all I really knew about it beforehand. And it's like, oh, this is going to be like the next Gone Girl and next Girl on the Train or something. And hopefully it's more Gone Girl than Girl on the Train. So there's that. And this movie has had a lot of production issues, mostly in post-production. Like, it was filmed in 2018, and they were supposed to release it in 2019, but test screenings didn't really go so well. They got a lot of negative reviews from people, and they retooled the entire movie under Scott Rudin. You know, back when it was okay to work with Scott Rudin, I guess. And also it was supposed to be released last year, but then the pandemic happened, closing all cinemas, and Disney Fox just said, no, we're not gonna release it in theaters right now. And then they went all the way to say, hey, let's just sell it to Netflix. Let's just put it on there, and hopefully they can do something with it, because we don't really know what to do with this thing anymore. And after watching this movie, I can officially say that the post-production troubles were more interesting than the movie. This movie is so dull. It's so boring, unfortunately. It's very disappointing considering the caliber of the cast, the director involved, and even like the book. I'd never read the books, but knowing it's a popular book, and you know, maybe people would be invested in this. Unfortunately, it's not. There are a few good things in this. Amy Adams is really good in this performance, as, you know, she's battered down by... That's a bad word, but, like, she's deals with her agoraphobia, deals with her alcoholism, and you definitely feel sympathy for her. I'll give her that. Julianne Moore is pretty good in this brief role. She seems very likable in this movie, and unfortunately, like, when you get to know some things about her in the movie, it's not nearly as interesting, unfortunately, and it's just a little disappointing when you find out. The way they portray Amy Adams' situations, for the most part, at least for the first half, I would say, I think it's definitely well done. Like, particularly her agoraphobia. Like, most of the movie actually takes place in her apartment, so that kind of makes sense for, you know, to have an agoraphobic character, and yet the entire movie kind of just takes place in her apartment for the most part. So it kind of, I do like that. I do like that angle, at least. But other than that, this movie is kind of a disaster. Now I mentioned Amy Adams and Gary Oldman. No, not Gary Oldman. Amy Adams and Julianne Moore were good in this movie. Everyone else in this movie, they range from, why are you here? You're not really doing anything, to, holy God, you are so bad in this movie. There are a ton of actors in this movie who don't really get to do anything, like Brian Tyree Henry. Man, I feel so bad for him. Like, why is he in these, like, forgettable roles? Like, he's a good actor, and he plays this detective who's technically working with Gary Oldman, and he's forgettable. Jennifer Jason Leigh, she's forgettable. Like, she only appears in a few scenes. And Anthony Mackie, wow, what? He's only in this movie for one scene, and it's a flashback. I won't spoil anything, but yeah, it's disappointing to say the least. Also, the actor who played Gary Oldman and Julianne Moore's son in this movie, I thought he was also really bad too. I try not to be mean to child actors, but this kid is so bad, I just was annoyed. Meanwhile, there are a lot of homages to certain movies, like older classic movies, particularly like, say, Rear Window, because, you know, Amy Adams is looking at, like, what's going on across the street and everything. And it doesn't really work too well, unfortunately. It's just more an homage just for the sake of doing an homage. Because Amy Adams loves watching classic movies. So we gotta reference all these classic movies as possible. This cinematography is very generic. The music's pretty generic. A lot of this feels very generic. And a lot of it just seems like it definitely feels more like Girl on the Train. Like, I didn't care for that movie, really. And I didn't really care for this one either. So, unfortunately, it was more that than Gone Girl. It's forgettable. It's predictable. It's just unfortunate because I do think there is a good idea and the setup is pretty good, but the overall execution is pretty bad. Also, I forgot to mention this. Gary Oldman. Oh my god, Gary Oldman. Oh my god, he's so bad in this movie. It's hilarious. And this is the same director who got him an Oscar for Darkest Hour. Like, there's literally a scene where he's confronting Amy Adams, and, he's yelling at her saying, don't go near my son. And it just sounds so terrible. Like, the way he says it is just so funny to me. Oh, God. I like Gary Oldman, but man, that performance, that was really bad. That was the worst performance in the entire movie. So, The Woman in the Window, it's a very forgettable movie. The performances by Amy Adams and Julianne Moore are good. And the way it's set up, I don't mind, actually. I do think it works. But the actors need to do a better job, and it kind of just needed to do something to make it stand out. And it really didn't. It's like, yeah, flashbacks. Yeah, it's a lot of similarities to stuff like, say, Gone Girl and Girl on the Train. And, references to classic movies. That's this movie. It's a mess. And the behind-the-scenes disaster that was the post-production was a lot more interesting than this movie. I'll give The Woman in the Window, because of the way it's set up and the acting, I'm not going to say skip it, but I'll say 1.5 out of 4 stars. Stream it. So, what was the most disappointing book adaptation? That's an interesting question. Did you watch Woman in the Window? Comment down below, subscribe to the channel. This is Pat, and stay safe.